If everybody's comfortable, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm just going to introduce myself, and if we can do a quick go around the room. We are here to discuss the Brattleboro Microtransit service being no longer being continued as of June 13th. And this is a public meeting for any questions and answers to be held. And I am Christine Howe. I am the general manager of the MOOver, Southeast Vermont Transit. I'm going to be running the presentation, and I'll go around and let everybody in the room, and then we have at least one person on Zoom that we'll let introduce.
Great, thank you. I'm Wendy Harrison. I'm one of your state senators. I live in Brattleboro, and I was on the MOOver board for 7 or 8 years. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Senator. Ross McDonald. I'm the Public Transit Program Manager at VTrans, and I'm just here to watch the conversation and learn to hear more. Thank you.
Where do you want to start?
How about we start with Jen in the back?
Oh, hey. I'm Jen Stromston. I'm Director of Programs at the Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, and as you'll hear in this, we were part of sort of launching this pilot, doing the research for it, and working with specific clients, but also general trainings to help employers and folks kind of know how to access it.
I'm Colin Bratton. I work for the Wyndham Regional Commission, mostly doing transportation stuff. So I'm just in the loop about what's been going on both locally and with the state.
How about up here?
I'm Mary Claire. I'm the petition starter.
You are, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'm glad to see you all here. I'm Yolanda Cross, and I'm a writer of the Microtransit.
Elizabeth Crow. I'm a retired teacher and a user of the MOOver, an enthusiastic user.
Afternoon, my name is Tara O'Brien. I was on the Human Services Committee that gave you money to do the startup. I also was a user for a few months and also happened to work at the library, and we'd like to recommend it to patrons, but we had some challenges with the technology.
The gentleman up front?
My name is Micah Ranquist. I've been a public transportation user my whole life, but ever since I've been here, since 2010, I've been using all the different bus system things, and this is the first glimmer of hope of big change, and then now it's going away.
And online?
Randy Shoemaker, CEO of Southeast Vermont Transit.
I think, is that all we have online, Randy? Do you see anybody else besides the TV, besides Nolan?
That for us, the users that we were very focused on were people who had afternoon work, that they are currently at work. So
Right.
While we can't help the timing of public meetings, there's specifically people who their job starts at 12 or 1 and goes until 8 or 9 or 10 or 11. So just to be clear that it's always important to consider who's not able to be in this room for a variety of reasons, and that's one category.
Right. Jen, thank you very much for bringing that up. And Marie Claire brought that up too, that not only are folks at work, they're getting ready for work, and they might not be able to be here without transit at all. So thank you very much.
So I would be remiss if I did remind everybody that when you do have a specific question or speak, Nolan reminded me that everybody should be near a microphone. So if it's okay, if I just remembered to. So if you have something specific that you want everybody to be able to hear, including online, just step up to the microphone. So we're going to go ahead and just do a quick presentation. This is kind of some history about how it launched and how we got started. So in 2022, we did a feasibility study. VIA was the company that did it. And it's just kind of, the feasibility studies basically just figure out if there's actually the ridership and the demographic to support what we want to do for a route. And then also in 2022, the BDCC, Brattleboro Development Credit Corporation, did business surveys to find out what employees needed for transit to be able to fill some of those later shifts and so forth. And then in 2023, we added rider surveys, and we did that on our fixed routes because our fixed routes did still service some of those people getting to work, but not necessarily being able to get home from work. In April 15th of '24, so we're just over a year now, we launched the service. And just in case everybody is not aware, go ahead, Randy. Oh, Randy's, he just took a phone call.
Yes, thank
For funding, to start the pilot program, there wasn't VTrans funding to start the pilot program. So we were able to secure funding graciously through, Jen helped with the BDCC getting Northern Borders grant money for $100,000. The town of Brattleboro has a human services fund that we apply for each year. It's separate from select board funding, that's important to know. And the first year, they granted us $24,000. We had a Thompson Trust Foundation that we tapped into. That was a 2-year grant. And then in this current fiscal year, VTrans was able to find some CMAQ funding to give a portion of the federal money, and then some other money that comes from a different portion of grant funding from VTrans. So VTrans had about $50,000 that they contributed towards running the Brattleboro Microtransit pilot for this first year. So it came up to $189,000. And we put some statistics in here. This just shows you the performance and where the trips go, the purpose people use them for. And as you can see, the majority of the trips are later in the week. We have a trend that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday are busier than the first half of the week. The majority of it is for employment. And this is based on riders giving us the information of what they're using it for. So if there's something that says personal, they may not have, decided that they wanted to share with us what they were using it for. So sometimes people would use that as kind of a catch-all. But you can see that our rides were really, really strong last summer. We were up in the 116, 125, 122, and then they kind of wavered down, and in the last few months, they've kind of averaged a little bit over 100. Yes?
Can you try sharing the full screen? Because it's not sharing on Zoom. We're not seeing
The full screen.
presentation, yes.
Oh, I think it's probably why.
So if you stop sharing on Zoom, when you go full screen, it's a different thumbnail, so.
Hold, please.
Sorry.
Like that?
Captions.
Yes,
That'll work?
let me go check.
Okay.
But keep going.
Okay. So now you can't really see, okay, that's fine. So this is really the purpose of this meeting. We announced, I think it was in March, that because of insufficient support, this route is going to be cut and cease as of June 13th. We did June 13th because that's kind of when the funding will run out for this fiscal year, and it ended on a Friday, so we felt that was the smoothest way to transition, that we weren't going to do it in the middle of a week or something like that. But the local financial support, there's the 2-year funds from the Brattleboro Human Service Grant. We had, like I said, we had gone in and put an application in again for next fiscal year. We did not get any money from that grant this year. The Northern Borders Grant and Thompson Trust would have been replaced by VTrans funding if we had gotten that 20% local funding. Some people have asked about fares. Fares really only cover about 2% of the total cost, and they cannot be used for that 20% match. And then really just the low ridership and high cost per ride. So VTrans does a study every year. It's called the Route Performance Report, and it breaks down all sorts of data. It takes the costs of the route, it takes trips, it takes miles, all of this information, and comes up with a cost per ride. And they have a specific guideline that they use for what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. And right now, this particular route, the cost per ride is higher than the maximum cost per ride on that route performance report. So that's another reason why when you put all these pieces together, it's just not feasible to continue this route. And then we just wanted to note the amount of service that we do still provide in the town of Brattleboro. This is not going to affect any of these other pieces. Your fixed route, red, white, and blue are still all going. Your ADA service The older persons and disability transit service is still going, Medicaid NEMT service is still going. So none of that is going to get affected by this particular cut. So we provide about 135,000 rides annually with all those other pieces. So it's just important to know that this is just this, unfortunately, it's just this one route that we're discussing today to be cut.
Okay, so,
Sorry, the elderly disabled, 2 out of 4 rides will be canceled.
The social trip piece, yes.
that's important. All right, well, I just want to say a couple of things, and then would really like to hear from the riders, especially. I'm disappointed. I was very excited about this effort. We did a route study, I think about 5 years ago, and changed the routes, and evening service was the biggest barrier, and that was what was asked for most. And I really appreciate, Jen didn't, maybe you said you're with BDCC, but having the Economic Development Authority or the Economic Development Agency being involved in transit is so important. And in general, we need to diversify our revenues drastically. Transportation is suffering from a lack of revenues, and it's been going down for decades. But having economic development funding and just interest in this is so crucial. And I don't want, if this service does get canceled, it shouldn't be seen as a reason for these other entities not to continue working on transit, because the businesses need their employees to be able to get to work. And the businesses, if we had a way to get appropriate funding from them, it would probably be a very small amount. But the challenge is that when we're looking at donations as opposed to something that's required, it's tough for folks to be the first group to pay when they see others not paying. So then it goes on to the individuals, which is not fair. Normally, especially fixed routes, you give it 3 years to sugar out and see if it works. And this one, we only gave 1 year. And as I said, I do, even if we can't save this one, and it is late in the process, it's really important, and I'm committed to having something like this continue or be resumed, because it's just so important. And so I will do whatever I can to keep this going. And I'd really like to hear from you, and I'd like especially Ross and the providers to hear from you.
We do have a question online. Just unmute yourself, Jessica, and you should be able to go ahead and speak.
Thank you.
Say something. Thank you, Becca.
You said that so well. It's really true. It's amazing to me that we're even discussing it, because it's so vital to the future of the children here, the jobs. It's more important than anywhere else, especially in a rural community that's trying to build up and one that's working so hard on economic development. To lose the MOOver is a huge mistake, huge. First of all, if you...
Federal funding, which I don't understand why we're not getting. We can't afford to do it here. The federal government needs to help Vermont, because Vermont is building up, and it's in the best interest of the rest of the country, okay? It is so vital. It's for the children. It's for the education. You're ruining the future of the children here. They're losing their buses. You're talking about children that are in rural schools, some of which don't have any friends, and there's 4 kids in the grade. That ride is vital to them, because they get to go to a school where there's arts and they're not treated like weirdos, and they have a whole new trajectory on life that you are taking away by doing that, and you can't afford to do it here. Vermont can't afford to carry everything it carries. It needs to be given more for transportation and more for infrastructure, for restoring, for conserving. That costs more than regular places. The MOOver is a signature Vermont product. They did such a brilliant job with the MOOver. That should be totally funded, and you keep the MOOver like you have the other things in the Vermont brand. Like I'm on the Vermont Public this panel. I know I talk fast, but I know I don't have time. And it's very important to me. Thank God I didn't miss this. I wanted to get there, and I don't have a car right now. Okay, because of a boyfriend, a bad breakup, long story short. But the MOOver is so important, and it's also a signature Vermont thing. It's such a great look, the cow, and you guys are the only ones in the world that offer free transportation, and you can't even afford to do it. The government, the federal government, needs to give Vermont more money in transportation. We need the MOOver. You don't cut the MOOver down. You will have so much business. People will be buying. I would go to Brattleboro every night to shows, to meetings, but I can't. There's no ride home because the MOOver can't afford to fund itself. It's a brilliant idea. They should be honored, and they should be kept here like a staple. They need money, and transportation is a lot more than transportation, everybody. I didn't know that, Becca, by the way. I know you guys know that. But it's a lot more than transportation. It's a major part of public safety. You need transportation. It's one of the main things you have to invest in. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And Jessica, just to be clear, it's only this one service, the evening service, that's the micro-moo that is proposed to be.
No, I know that, but they don't get enough.
Thank you.
Through there. Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Claire Rose. I cannot drive due to disability. Often I become confused in unfamiliar places, and in the past I've had to call the police when I was stranded after hours. But ever since the micro-moo, I've been able to accept nighttime jobs and keep my independence. Micro-moo brings people from all over Brattleboro to and fro safely, sometimes having more than 30 rides per night. To name a few businesses: The Retreat, Brattleboro Memorial Hospital, Ramunto's, Burger King, Wendy's, Families First, The Latches, SIT International Students, and more. Without the micro-moo, we will be stranded, miss work, and businesses will lose customers. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. And Marie Claire, do you want to speak to the petition that you have? And do you want to share that with?
I also have created a petition called Keep the Micro-moo, which is on change.org/keep-the-micro-moo. And I have here several Brattleboro signatures with me. There's no count, but they're all from the city of Brattleboro. There are in total 389 signatures. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Yes, are you able to stand up and use the microphone, or do you want, okay.
I don't know where it is.
Yep.
No, everyone jump. Just listen.
And you're-
Probably right here where this woman was standing, because
Yes,
I know how to
yes.
pay attention.
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Micah Ranquist. I'm a local business owner. I'm a blind resident. As I understand, this decision is already made for this to just be gone. However, was it Wendy's point of being all about making this, something like this continue or happen again or whatever in the future, I'll be heard. To the online person's point, Jessica, I think was her name, about children. Some people might know the name Ray Ranquist as of late. That would be my kid, who has been in select board meetings and really trying to participate, representing the young people in the community. She has the opportunity to use something like micro-moo, as any other teenager might, to be able to independently do some of these public service kinds of things, like what she's doing. And with it being cut, there is less of an opportunity for the young people to be able to do it independently. And independence is important. I get that as a blind person. I've never been able to drive. It is undignifying to have like a whole life of having to ask for help. The micro-moo made that, a little less some of the time. For me in particular, I'm an independent business owner. I'm doing pretty well. I can afford to pay for the Uber that's now in town to drive me back and forth, to be able to see clients in the evening as opposed to only during the day when the bus runs. But, not everyone can do that. So I feel like it's important to, even though I have alternatives, not everyone does, it's important to consider for those running the MOOver and for, local legislators and whatnot, select board people, whoever might be hearing this at some point, this isn't as simple as we're going to cut something expensive. It's a pretty crucial part of this community at large, I think, moving forward, being differently progressive than it has in the past. And I hope that someone can figure out a way to make it keep going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I just want to, Representative Molly Burke is here
Yes.
also. Yes.
Yes.
My name's Elizabeth Kroll, and I'm a resident of Brattleboro. I really appreciate your being here and having this meeting. And I'm a retired teacher. I use the MOOver, and I'd like to make a few points. I agree with what everybody's been saying. Just on a minor note, if the performance guidelines are 50 maximum per ride and we're $4 off, I would hope that maybe that could be resolved. So just as a minor point there. I think the main thing is that we need a way to get around town on public transportation. And it's isolating to have a situation where people can't get around in the evening, and maybe they can't afford an Uber, or they don't use smartphones and they don't know how to deal with that. We used to have a taxi service where you could go anywhere for $10, but I don't believe that's available anymore, and it didn't require any technology. So that option is gone. So again, you've got the employment situation getting to and from, and you've got the young people not being able to get around independently to activities and from activities. And you've got the isolation, and that's a major problem here in Vermont. We are rural, and people need to be able to get together and get to activities. So I would hope that if this cannot be continued, it's such a good program in terms of human services, then I hope that some other way can be found to do it, because it's very precious and very valuable, and I think it's used and would be used even more if it becomes kind of a regular, dependable service that we can count on. So I would hope that the town and the state can make it a priority. With federal funding, we don't quite know what's going to happen, and I guess there's a feeling we need to try to step up on a state and local level to maintain quality of life. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a question, which is, looking at the graph of rides per day and cost per ride of the Brattleboro service versus the other comparable services in different cities around Vermont, my understanding, I could be wrong, is that the other cities and towns listed, that those are daytime microtransit services by and large. Is that right? And that Brattleboro is the only one of those listed as a nighttime specific service?
That's correct.
And so I guess my question was just if there are any other nighttime specific services either in Vermont or maybe in a comparably rural area somewhere else, that would provide like a sort of a more comparable data point for the Brattleboro service?
Yeah. Hey, Colin. I would like to spend just a few moments talking about microtransit and how we got to this place. And so in Vermont, the state invests $53 million. About 75 to 80% of that comes from the federal government. And the federal government provides transit dollars. And those transit dollars are about $13 million total. And that's for the buses and for the operations, the admin, those types of things. But in Vermont, we take that $13 million and we add $23 million from the federal highway program, the bridge and road monies, from that bucket of funds. And we also inject about $10 million in state funds from our local tax dollars, primarily from the DMV monies. And we know it's not enough. Even though it's the most well-funded program in rural America, these are the discussions that we're part of all over the state. When we saw microtransit come to larger cities, Vermont many times looks at what's going on in the large areas, and because of our funding position, we have an opportunity to test it on behalf of rural areas. And so the microtransit mode really made a lot of sense to us. We don't have the density that would justify a bunch of buses going everywhere all day long. And we thought that this one would be more convenient. You wouldn't have to get to the bus stop. We can get closer to where you are and get you closer to where you want to go, rather than hope that we were planning where you probably want to go and where you probably are now. So when we did those feasibility studies in 2022, we asked the providers, and SCVT is one of 7 providers, can you work with us and identify 2 communities you would like to study microtransit in? And Brattleboro certainly was one of them. So we did these 14 studies and said, okay, well, let's try some pilots. And this is when we had COVID money and costs were about half of what they are now. And we tried 6 pilots, and this is getting to Colin's answer, a long way to get to his answer, is we wanted to find a bunch of scenarios in microtransit to see where that service would fit best in rural Vermont. So we tried one to replace one circulator route in a small town in Morrisville. We started one in Manchester and Windsor where there is no transit, but there's a high level of demand response dial-a-ride service. And we thought maybe we could transfer those expensive trips onto microtransit and get the general public to use them. And we looked in Montpelier to replace 3 public transit routes with a microtransit service. And in Brattleboro, it was the evening service in one of our larger towns. And so what does that look like? And so all told, we've been looking at those 6 pilots, and now we have a 7th in place, to try to figure out, is this cost effective? Is it meeting the needs of the public in a better way? Is it a better return on investment? And what we found is that it is not a less expensive service. What we have found is that it hasn't increased ridership anywhere by 2 or 3 times what we were providing before, but overwhelmingly in those areas outside of Montpelier where there's already a bit of robust transit, almost like the red, white, and blue here in Brattleboro, we had about half the riders say, we liked the old system. I only had to get to the bus stop. I had the schedule. I didn't have to make a phone call. I didn't have to get that trip. And we started seeing that the average cost of those trips was around $30. And so when we look at our microtransit classification, we look at tourism, we look at commuters, we look at in-town, we look at small-town services, all trying to compare like transit routes all over the state so that, we can see who's expensive and where it's working, where do we need to spend some time to make some adjustments. And so that's how we got to this place. And after, when I'm thinking about what Mike had said, which is, hey, we started this program. It was really useful for a lot of folks, and now it's going away. I think what happened was that we pulled the trigger to start the service without sustainable funding in place. And when we had that discussion, that was the big concern, is are we going to be able to show enough value to the community to step in and to take those one-time funds and make them ongoing funds? And what more would you need from the federal monies that we grant out? And when we looked at the numbers, we just didn't see a way forward. And that's why when Senator Harrison says, well, if there's another time in the future, we expect to have opportunities in the future. What we are dealing with in the current is trying to get to this post-COVID number. Commuter routes are up 105%, and dial-a-ride is up 105% pre-COVID. The budget before COVID hit was $36 million, and I just mentioned it's 53 now. You can imagine state agencies with programs that need 40% more funding. It's difficult to continue to invest in new services. So this year, when we worked with GMT in the urban area and they made their $1.5 million in cuts, a lot of it was evenings and weekends and summer hours. When we talk about where we need other services, evenings and weekends are what we hear about, especially in the larger towns where we have transit service. But when we looked at those cuts and what we spent last year, I had asked the providers, and looking at that route performance report, hey, Northeast Kingdom and Central Vermont and Southeast Vermont, are there areas like with your new starts that aren't performing very well, or are there underperforming aspects of some of your better performing routes that we can adjust downward to get to this number so that this budget committee at VTrans and our transit committees in the legislature, of which Senator Harrison sits on, and Representative Molly Burke, who I know, was that we can come back to the table and say, okay, we've made reductions and adjustments on commuter routes. We're trying to find ways to bend the cost curve down on dial-a-ride. We've canceled some pilots that weren't performing very well. Here's the new normal, and where can we build from that? And so that's really where we are, sitting up there in Barrie, trying to figure out how to make the best use of our transit dollars. And I just wanted to mention, this isn't the first meeting, that we've been to this year. We've made several cuts around the state. It's the worst part of the program for sure, and we don't take these lightly. We have not made cuts based on budget pressures in my 18 years at the state, and being in this situation reminds us why we need to avoid potentially starting up services that we cannot sustain.
Okay, so let me just, a couple of things. Can we go back to the why is the program being cut? Because we are, actually, let's go back even to the one before that shows the trend and how the service was most used in the summer, which we're about to be in. And this is actually a big turnout for a small town, and lots of these folks represent other institutions, so they represent others. So I just want to note that we're at the cusp of our busiest time, and with the getting the word out that this is supposed to be canceled could certainly enhance and stimulate some more ridership. So then the next slide, please, talks about the funding, which there was, I guess, an assumption made. I think we only received, I keep saying the we because I used to be on the board, but the MOOver only received funding 1 year from the Human Services Subcommittee.
Correct.
So, and I don't remember how much that was.
24,000.
24,000. So it almost sounds like because we didn't get $24,000 that the route is being canceled. And to me, we can find $24,000 to make this route happen.
But that's actually not what it is. So if you look at this slide, you'll see that only 50,000 of it came from VTrans. The rest of it was basically private, different grants. So Northern Borders was $100,000, 24 was Brattleboro Human Service, and 15 was Thompson. So the majority of it came from.
Right.
Right.
139.
Right.
Right.
No, I understand that, but then what the other slide said, and that's another reason I don't want to terminate the service is it's really not typical to get grant funding from those other entities for transit. I mean, that's unusual, and I'm sure it wasn't easy to get. And I would like those entities to continue to support transit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jen Stromston from BDCC. I have notes, so I don't ramble. It's work, WRC, which is sort of different than the regular state fundings. Just to be clear, we didn't compete with other Vermont entities. This is a federal program for workforce. So those are Northern Borders dollars. No, we can't get those again, and it's a one-time thing. And it's workforce dollars, right? That's what they're really meant to support. What are the gaps that make it hard for people to get to jobs and training? I don't want to relitigate what can happen right now or what not. And so, Randy and I had Randy Shoemaker.
He's on here.
Of the
He's
MOOver.
on here.
I'm sorry, I just call him Randy because we had a lot of conversations about this. Like, what are the risks of doing a thing that we know we probably don't know how we can continue? And Randy was in conversation with you regularly, and I know this, but we also said, well, first of all, we need it. We just need it. And so, and second of all, we need to test how helpful this is. What does this do for people? How does this work? Is this feasible at all? Right? Because this is not like other microtransit programs, right? Those other programs are for people to do more service trips, right? More like, needs trips. We don't have, do you have Monday through Friday, like workforce routes? That's not as common.
Yeah, and so our microtransit in the morning and the evening generally require an extra bus or two to clear the workforce demand, the commute demand.
Yeah, so that's, it's used for a variety of purposes. This was really kind of this special, like, there's this empty time, and our economy is very much in terms of entry-level roles geared towards production schedules or entry-level hospital and nursing home roles that are very 24/7 kinds of operations. I think, first of all, I just want to say the MOOver's been phenomenal to work with, and we knew this risk. We took the Hail Mary on this, and just said, let's try to make this happen. And I think everyone's just done an incredible job. So that's all I want to say about them, you, and thank you. And I do believe, too, that if we had a 3-year runway, which we also wish we had, we would see this continue to grow because there's, the young people are not using it to the extent that they ought to be. And that's just a whole other, there's many constituencies. We're also seeing programs contracting right now. And as you know, when it comes to the housing, work, transportation thing, people are going to have to make a choice between housing and transportation. They're going to give up their car or they're going to live in their car, right? So as that pinch gets worse, this just, becomes more poignant. I want to say, this is... Slow down. Yeah, sorry. One of the things that I want to just say is, I think there are some ways in which VTrans is evaluating different programs that is apples to oranges, and I want you to take into consideration in the future different ways of looking at different areas and needs. So, for instance, in this county, if you don't have a car, you are going to need to live in Wilmington, maybe, Brattleboro, or Bellows Falls, and probably Brattleboro. So to equate the needs here to other towns that's tough, right? It's not really the same thing. This town has the vast majority of carless households. And so service here is especially precious and acute in terms of need. We also don't have alternatives. So when we're compared, I don't know if that $50 threshold is the same in Burlington, but per rider, I don't know what the threshold, if that's just for rural areas.
Each classification has its own own metrics.
Yeah, because we don't really have affordable Uber. We barely have Uber. I don't. Micah has somebody, but I mean, there's not really a reliable Uber. There's not a taxi company. That evaporated in COVID, so people just don't have options, and that is distinct, right, to this area. I also think we need to just think about different ways of evaluating public transit needs that don't pit different kinds of users against each other. I think when we talk about night and weekend rides or rides that connect different communities versus people sort of doing, getting to a select board meeting in their own community, getting to and from a job, to and from like vital services or classes, they're just different. And I think it's not fair. And I think we often do see these dollars pitting people who are, frankly doing something that is more of a quality of life thing versus like a live or die kind of a thing. And I don't want to say what that is, but I just want to really urge everyone to kind of take the economic development and economic mobility and survivability thing and think about indexing that a little bit more strongly. So yeah. I'll leave that there. Thank you.
It's
Thank you,
very
Jen.
helpful. I totally agree. Anybody else?
Jessica, you have your hand up again? Oh, no.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was gonna say, I agree with her completely.
And, it's really important. We shouldn't have to choose between the two, like she just said. I was just wondering why we can't get any extra from the federal government. It's not like Vermont has more money. You're just moving money around that you don't have. Why won't the federal government help? We need that here. They have to help bring Vermont up for the benefit of the rest of the country. You're talking about people that need education, need jobs, need everything. We need money for that. Why would we have to choose instead of getting help from the government when we have so little? And also, Uber is not safe. Uber is not safe. You don't know who you're getting. People have been raped in Uber. I don't even like Uber. I don't think it's safe. It's the only place where we don't think about what we're doing. Why would we get into the car with a strange man? It happens all the time. It's not safe. It's better to have the MOOver, and they need a lot of funding. But why can't we get it from the federal government? There's not enough money here.
Yeah, the federal government, you probably know they've stopped funding certain things. We are still getting our transit.
Yeah, but
Vermont receives much more federal money than it sends, which is important to know.
It should, because it needs more.
Okay.
It needs extra money.
Kathleen.
I'm Kathleen White from Brattleboro. I got here late, so I don't know what's been said. I don't want to repeat what people have said, but I guess I know how important it is to some people to be able to get to work or to get home from work, and I don't know what their options are going to be. And the person that I'm thinking about personally is a student from up at SIT who's a refugee student, and she works at the Boys and Girls Club 5 days a week and needs to get home at 6 so she can have dinner. And she doesn't have many options, but and I'm sure there's a lot of other people in that situation. I guess I was wondering about, how the MOOver is free, and that's great, but maybe it wouldn't generate enough money, but could we charge a low fee, $1 per ride?
Yeah.
Something like that. Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else to say.
That's helpful.
Just that I also come from an active transportation background, and we believe that taking the bus requires some walking to get there, and so it's important to let people get around in that way.
Yeah, if I can, on the fares, before COVID, we had fares in place around the state. And two of our providers didn't have fares because of local support, where they said, hey, rather than charge our low-income folks $1 to ride, let's go ahead and we'll make that donation. Also, the cost of handling the money and the fare boxes, and now we need fare boxes that read credit cards and debit cards and those types of things. It's a little pricey when you consider that before COVID, outside of Burlington, we received about $500,000 total funds in fare box revenue, and that comes from $250,000 of those $500,000 can be used to offset the federal dollars, and $250,000 can be used to offset the local dollars. When we talk about 112 routes around the state, we were looking at a fare box recovery of like, how much does this pay for? Between 3% and 6% for most routes. So then when COVID hit and we didn't want that contact, we said, how much money do we spend on fare boxes and all that stuff? How much money do we spend on people counting the money with the cameras on to go to the bank each day? Let's go ahead and try a fare-free system. And I think what we're getting to is this situation where we will need to look at increasing revenues however we can. And that could require a few $1 million in investment so that we can get the riders to pay $1 or $2 per trip. It's not something that we are running toward. It is easier to generate some dollars, but who are we getting those from, and what are we paying to get those dollars? And so we have, really been trying to stay fare-free outside of Burlington. Burlington went back to fares, and it's working okay because that's 10 to 20% of their revenues can be fares. If we're talking 3 to 6%, and that's in like an area like Brattleboro, then it's a little different calculation.
I understand that.
Yeah.
And it's actually just a lovely thing that it's free.
Yeah.
So.
Best intentions, but we are. That's what in a situation where we have gone from 36 to 53 million, and we say, hey, but we really need 54, 55. It's still not going to be enough. If it was 100 million, we saw a real quick snapshot of what would it take to get everybody to where they want to get to, like they do in Europe, in Switzerland. And we did the back of the napkin calculation on a public transit plan, and it was like $500 million. And that means everybody has to move into areas that are walkable to a train station, all that. It's just not feasible at this point without, land use changes being really, changed as well. So, again, in federal, where's the federal money? We get 13 million, and then we take other people's federal money, the federal highway program, to keep adding on transit service because we know how important it is, but it's just not enough. That's for sure.
And we are looking at other revenue sources. Tara, did you have something?
I just had a question, Tara O'Brien. When you realized that the funding was not going to be available for this service, did you have any campaigns to increase ridership? And also, did you have any campaigns to increase education on how to use the app? I myself, as a user, had challenges up the yin-yang. I could not use it. I could not use it because it rejected my username that I signed up with. And I'm not the only one. Some of my colleagues also had challenges with the app. So I was really curious if there have been targeted campaigns for increasing ridership and also on education.
So in the education piece, I will speak to the fact that I did multiple trainings, both in person, and we did one through Brattleboro Television to walk people through signing up both on the desktop version and on the app. And we did encourage people that if they had any issues to call directly in, because we have to be able to reset, say, a username and password. That involves getting in touch with the software company directly. And so we would need the people to call in, speak with somebody in dispatch. There's 2 managers there that have the ability to do that. And I know that on multiple occasions, there was somebody at the library, and was it you? Okay, you have your mask on, so I didn't recognize you, I'm sorry.
I was offered to have a program to educate
And so I remember speaking to you, I think at the safety meeting, and I said to you, please give me a call, and I'd be happy to come and do another, at the library, I think I offered to come and do more trainings, but I didn't hear from you. So we're more than willing to do more trainings, and we're more than willing to offer that help. As far as a campaign to increase ridership, we put it out there on our website. We do Facebook posts constantly. We're constantly in social media trying to increase. Rico is a very, very avid supporter. Obviously, word of mouth and so forth. So there's a lot of information out there, and we try to bring as much as we can. And I'm not, if you have other ideas, let us know. But we did do a lot of campaigning mostly on social media, because that's where we get the most feedback from people, is where they see that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Did you have a question?
I think Mike had something.
I think the young woman over there, did you have something? Well, you were next. Yeah.
Mike keeps raising his
Oh,
hand.
I'm sorry.
I
I also had difficulty understanding how the system worked when I signed up to do the rides, and it's not just me, as she said. I work with the unhoused families, and there was a lot of frustrations that we referred them to the MicroMover, and there was a lot of frustrations where they didn't show up. And a lot of it really wasn't that they didn't show up, is that they didn't understand how the system worked. And now that I'm using the MicroMover myself, it's a lot easier for me to see where that communication could have happened, and that maybe I could have helped with that, but I didn't know at the time. But I have found it to be difficult as well, the communicating with the rides. The first ride I took, they didn't show up, but it turned out it was at the wrong address, because the address in my neighborhood is really wonky. And so I didn't go out the next night. And so there was some confusion. I called up, and then now it's fine. But also calling in for the rides was, I said, can you just leave it as a standing order? I'm going to be doing this every week.
Right.
And they were saying, no, that's easier to do it, call every week. I'm like, no, it's really easier if you just, because I work overnight to get up in the morning, or I go home in the morning, I'm tired, I forget to call, to be honest with you. So I missed a Monday because of that. So there is some confusion over that, but I also wanted to, mention that there's other uses, like I know that we recommended for the Boys and Girls Club, that you can get kids there. The school bus will take them but they have no way to get home. And we had residents that wanted to use that, but there was a lot of questions around that, and they got permission to send the children home on the bus, but they didn't, for whatever their reasons were, didn't make use of that, the parents.
Okay.
But that's something that could be pushed, that or made known, that that's an option for families, that they could use that, and you'd be picking up a number of children at once if there was more than one child.
Yeah, I've actually had some conversations directly with BOHS to help the counselors there help after-school students who are playing sports, who needed to get home, and walked her through everything, and she was able to help them, and those students were able to get rides home. So there's all sorts of different options. So we've reached out to the schools as well.
Yeah, and with working with the unhoused, we have families that are using the bus, and right now they're looking at housing, and so they decide whether, it's already difficult to find housing, and now you've got to look at where am I going to live? Am I going to still be able to get to work? But you really need that housing, but you really need your job. I mean, it's like, how do you choose? That's not a position I'm in. I have housing, but I do still need transportation at night, and I'm able to take that mover at 11:15, and then in the morning I can take the regular bus when I get off my shift. But it's to get in at night, I'm going to be either walking, and I have neuropathy in my feet. It's not easy to be walking to work, or I'm going to be, I don't know, riding my bike, but it's 4 miles from my home. And then the other thing is, I understand that the funding is really tight and really tough right now, and you're saying, well, we're going to put something in place, but if you take this away now and then you try to put it in place later, you're interrupting a service that you're trying to build ridership on, and now you're interrupting that service. So to try to put it back in place in some other form is going to be difficult, because you're interrupting a service that you're already trying to build. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me, as far as that goes. I guess that's what I have right now. Thanks.
Thank you. And Mike, did you have more?
Okay.
Just gonna plug it in.
So I have a couple of tangential elements from several threads. One is, I'll just kind of go in reverse. The woman that was just talking, breaking down the system now is just breaking the trust and the capacity to make the system work later, which is not a good idea. Going backwards still, inconsistency in communication. I had no issues with setting up a recurring every single week thing with the MicroMove, so it's odd that some people would be told they couldn't, and some people are told that they can do that. I had it set up for months, actually, just a recurring thing. And then pertaining to the app, the Q-Ride is just not accessible for people that use screen readers, print disabled, whether they're blind or dyslexic or whatever. And if they need to use a screen reader of some sort, Q-Ride is just not accessible. The app just does not work. I had it tested by an accessibility expert up near Burlington. It just doesn't work. So but that one is just kind of a small potatoes really because, I can just call. But speaking of calling, if I needed to make adjustments to my transportation, there's nobody to answer a call. And the only way I can make adjustments is with the app. That doesn't work, at least not for me. Going backward further, kind of dipping into the funding bucket, I was reminded of I had a conversation with Jen a while back about teaching the new refugee population how to use our public transportation system. And in that conversation, we talked a bit about the idea that there was this specific new bus that was set up to go from the Multicultural Center to SIT during the middle of the day, during the week. If there's money for something like that, why can't there be money found to help support other things? Not that should be taken away and put into the MicroMove, but I mean, someone got creative and figured out where money was. So why can't someone, find some more money somewhere? The $24,000 topic, I'll go all the way back to the beginning. The way it was I understood this was that because micro-locally here in Brattleboro, money was not approved, we don't qualify for money going up the chain to help support this kind of transportation system. That I may have been given a misunderstanding, or I may have made it all on my own misunderstanding, but it kind of seems like, the problem is kind of going both directions. There's a bunch of federal nonsense happening, but also local people that, have the privilege of having their car to drive around in just don't want to support something they don't understand or don't want to have to deal with because it's not part of their regular purview. That's all.
It's helpful. That's a lot. Elizabeth?
Could I ask clarification? I don't use the MicroMover like at night. I live downtown, so I can get to a lot of the things I would want to. But is there a variety of ways to make the request? There's some people who might have a disability or they're older and they don't do apps and they don't do online stuff. Can they call and request a ride?
So they can call, but they can call during our regular business hours. So
Okay.
the one piece that's a little challenging sometimes for people that are new to the system is that particular route runs 5 o'clock to 11:30 p.m. The phones at the dispatch center end right around 5 o'clock. So they call during the day or they call at the beginning of the week and set it up for a recurring trip, not a problem. But once the 5 o'clock hits, then the app and the technology is really kind of where the user would book the ride in the moment. So it's kind of a combo.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question?
I think so, yes,
Okay.
thank you. So if something came up for the rider or the driver, I guess they'd have to leave a message on the voicemail or something?
So if they use the app, they can cancel the trip in the moment, and they can book the trip in the moment. But if they're not using the app or the technology, which the information we just received that the app is not user-friendly for, it's not accessible for disabled, some disabilities, that's good information. But if they use the app, they can book it in the moment, and they can also cancel in the moment.
So would they be able to leave a voicemail to inform you if something came up, or?
They could, but by that time, what would happen is the driver would still go to the location, and if the person was not there for the trip, they have a tablet, and they would cancel the trip in the moment, so that it would still be in the backside, so that the dispatch team in the morning would know that it was canceled, and then the driver would just move to their next requested trip.
So maybe that's something to think about, because a number of elderly or other riders, it's good that they can order the trip, but it's always good to have a plan B for if somebody can't use the usual procedure, what do they do? What's plan B?
Right.
But that's just a logistical thing. I guess the main thing I just wanted to emphasize, I'm learning so much here from everyone. it isn't just an economic situation, how is it working economically? I think it's a human situation. What kind of quality of life do we want in Vermont, and do we want here in Brattleboro? And we want to avoid people being unable to get around, being isolated. And it would be different if we had alternatives that were safe. I agree about Uber. I probably wouldn't use an Uber. We used to have a taxi, and I felt okay about that, but we don't have that now. So we have to think about what are the alternatives. They don't exist right now. And so it's a very crucial and valuable service. And I hope there'll be a way to either save it or prioritize it for getting it back. In our state, we want stability. We want quality of life. We don't want a lot of stop and start situations. And people are looking for that. They're looking for community support, both to give it and to get it, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, I think that's everyone who has made comments. As I said, I'm committed to doing what we can. Maybe we can find a way to make it happen through the summer so that we can see, experience the time period when we had the largest ridership that we had in the past. I don't know. We'll see what we can do. Sure.
I know that if it's on the chopping block, this probably is going to be a non-issue, and I don't know, maybe it's just throwing this out there, but why not have the driver have a company-issued phone that people could contact him directly with for those situations?
We do it. He does have a company phone for emergencies, but you're talking about for a rider to call him directly on the company phone?
Yeah, like it's when off hours or whatever, and you need to last minute cancel a ride, or that you need to contact them or whatever, That would have, like the day that there was miscommunication about the address, he could have easily just popped on and said, "Hey, where are you?" But
understood. Yeah.
I don't know how I don't know how that would work, but and this is just kind of a thought too, is that it's good to be able to, and understandable to be able to cancel or to plan a ride 24 hours ahead of time, but there's some people that may not need that, and they may need a ride quicker, and if he had access to that, he could give priority to those who have already pre-scheduled a ride, and then in that maybe the time that he has filling in that somebody needed a quick ride, they could call up and say, "Hey, you busy? Could you?" I don't know. It's just a thought.
It's a good thought. It's absolutely a good thought. Yeah, it's just logistics, like she mentioned. It's logistics to think about for tweaking it and making it a little more user-friendly.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and then just safety for the driver, obviously.
Right.
Because you don't want them.
Exactly.
But there are systems where you can get messages to drivers, and there's also systems where there can be a second person on the bus, too, a volunteer maybe. But that's
Or more staff people who, need to work till 11:30 while folks are there, right?
And that's
that would
more
increase money.
Yeah.
But again, this is the pilot, and this
Right.
is the test, and these are the things we learn, which is it's really tough not to have office support when you're running buses out in the street with no communication to those vehicles.
Go ahead, Mary Claire.
As a rider, I have autism and epilepsy, and it makes it extremely hard for me to navigate or to have a social life after, when most events are held at the library after hours, and I can't walk there from Canal to Maine or wherever. It's a long walk, and in the dark, it's confusing. And you're right. There are no Ubers, and there's nothing now. So I feel like I'm gonna be isolated at home yet again, just like a hermit. And I also have problems with the Q-Ride app. I've tried signing in, and I created a new password, but each time I try and sign in now, they say there is a technical error. I need to call the company. I have done that, but then they tell me not to call them and to just call in for the rides. I've also had one time when the MOOver missed me when I was coming to the bus, but he missed me by 1 minute while I was going there, and I had to get a ride from someone else. I don't like doing that. It's like asking for favors. I don't like doing that. But it's going to be increasingly hard for me now to reschedule everything and have to stay home all the time. It's just really disappointing, if anything. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thanks for gathering the signatures. Yeah, Mike?
Can I just offer a point of clarity? For everyone in the room, there are Uber drivers locally. I appreciate that not everyone may feel safe with that. You know, we all have our own experiences. But there are two of them that are pretty consistent. One of them drives from about 6 in the morning till about 9 at night. And the other one is fairly consistent on weekends. So they are there, they do exist. Not everyone has access to that kind of thing. But just to, I've heard a couple times that there aren't Ubers or whatever. And there are, if that's something that you want to try, that exists here.
Thank you.
That's good to know.
Yeah. You know, maybe one other thing to consider working with businesses is we do have a program called Go Vermont, and part of that is an employer outreach program where we meet with employers and talk with them about their HR needs, and we'll ask for a zip code analyses and see if there's people who would be willing to share the ride, and if the business would be willing to help with van pools or to incentivize car pools and those things. Because what we just mentioned is most states this size would have about a $14-15 million transit program. Ours is 53, and it's not enough. And so how do we fill in those transportation gaps, you know, without putting in infrastructure for fewer people, for fewer trips? And we are hoping that businesses can help us meet some of those demands. And we've had some successes, but it's very difficult to ask a business to help get their employees to and from work based on their schedule. But it is something that is available, and it's online. And we have people who do this all day long. And so if anybody would like to work with us, Jen?
Yeah, I want to speak to that.
Yeah, please.
Jen Stromston. This is another way in which I think that programs are insensitive to this region and to rural regions, right? The size of our employers is not such that these programs work. We have tried. I actually ran the enterprise program, and we were the driver doing it for multiple employers because they were so small and had so few people, and that we were literally hiring the people to drive the van pool using the state program. We were trying to get employers to pay for their part of it. But when someone stays with them for 90 days or a year or less, they're just especially for production jobs and where there's a certain amount of turnover, it's just really not that compelling. It just is not the way those employers, it's the type of employment, it's the size of our employers, it's the capacity. Most of our employers don't have more than 1 or 2 HR people. They don't have the staff to take on inventing a commuter program. Many of them are owned by somebody away, right? They might have started here, but they're not owned here at this point, right? So if they're talking about offering a benefit that doesn't actually benefit most of their employees, they have to work that up the chain to some other HR person who's based in another state or wherever, who has to figure out a way to make that equitable. Well, we're going to have to offer a transportation benefit for the people who aren't using the ride. I mean, so I spent 2.5 years in deep conversation with half a dozen employers about how they might be able to use these programs. And in the end, it's just really not a fit for the types of employers and the scale of employers that we have. And again, it's sort of apples to oranges. Like, we're not Rutland, we don't have GE. We're not Burlington, we don't have UVM Medical Center and whatever that aerospace thing is. You know, it's just different. And so it's not just smaller. It's like it's really different in nature in terms of the capacity, willingness, resources of our employers. So I'm not saying that there's not some way. Some of them are doing it, and I want to give some credit to that. I mean, there are a couple of employers who have been doing a piece of these rides privately. But in the end, part of why we also don't get enough critical mass to these programs is, well, like there's a number of agencies that also have their own vans for just their own clients, right? So they're not using Micromoo because they're running their own vans to and from things at night when they can, That's subject to funding. They lose that staff or they lose that van, they won't. They will also be hurting, right? So the atomized way in which we try to solve this problem can't be overcome in a short period of time. But I also don't think that devolving this to sort of, nonprofits or the town or employers is realistic. Like public transportation has to be sort of a top-down kind of everybody in thing. So I think in the long run, that's the conversation I think, we want to be having, and sort of like, how do we create something that does something for people that is kind of everybody's in it and understands it. And, I hope there's another shot at this at some time in the future. And I'm really, really sad to hear, the impact this is going to have on people. We've been working with the clients that we work with directly through workforce programs to make sure that they have sort of a long off-ramp. And what that looks like for a lot of them is a lot of walking, a lot of biking, paying some dollars to a coworker, to figure out gas money. So, people will figure it out, but it's going to hurt. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth?
One more minor thought. In terms of publicity and trying to get the readership up, it's good, as a teacher, I had to teach the different modalities and different strengths and different ways to reach people. And so I don't know if we've publicized it like on the radio stations or flyers in the supermarket. Did you know? Or do you want to go to the Latches Theater at night? There's a way to get there. Things like that, because not everybody is technologically savvy. A lot of elderly people are not, and there are other people who are not. I know people who are not. They don't use the computer. But everybody shops around town. So there might be ways. And I would love to see some kind of publicity thing in town with the NECA students, maybe giving a little excitement and helping to publicize about the MOOver. Maybe they could have MOOver costumes, I don't know. But more than one way to spread the word, maybe.
Good suggestions. So I think we're probably ready to conclude. Yes?
If there's no more questions, there's no more questions online.
Everybody? Okay.
Yeah.
So how will we communicate back to folks?
Well, did everybody sign in or leave some kind of contact information? And then we would obviously do press releases or anything on our social media or our website. So if you're not on our social media and you have the ability to, great. And then we always do writer handouts too. So if there's anything that's going to be communicated differently or any changes, it'll go through Rico and all of our fixed route drivers as well. So it'll be put out there like that as well.
Okay, and the date right now that is planned, it's June something.
June 13th is right now the last date of service.
June 13th.
It's a Friday, June 13th.
So that's a month from today.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Yes, please.
Yes.
Yeah, we'd love to have the
Do you have a copy of them? Did you
I
keep
have them online.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you, everyone.
Yes,
And
thank you, Mary Claire.
let's all
Thank you.
stay in touch. All right, so maybe, okay. So we are adjourned.
Randy, did you have anything else you wanted to add? Or are you good? You good? Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming.
Yeah, I would like a copy of this. Maybe they'll let me see if I can go get this.